been following along for the first 2 weeks, what we do in the month of January is we talk about the first chapter, kind of the executive summary of Ernest Holmes' seminal textbook, The Science Mind. And so the first week, what we talked about was the thing itself, the nature of God. And for those of you who were here, you'll remember that what we said was that God is a principle, it works through immutable laws, and it's activated by our thoughts. Okay, so God's a principle. God's not a big scary guy in the clouds. God is a principle that works through immutable laws. And those laws are activated in our lives by our thoughts. And then last week, we talked about the way it works. And what we said is that God always works for good. And that it works through us, not outside of us. And that we get as much of that good as we can conceive. So now you're all up to speed, right? So you're all experts on Science Mind, the first 2 chapters. Yay. This is really rich stuff, and it's been very interesting going through this, seeing how in these first 4 chapters, Ernest Holmes really drills down to the minutiae of his teaching. And as I was reading it, of course what I want to say to most of it is, well, I know that, well, I know that, well, I know that. But he really takes it apart and pulls it apart and looks at all the different facets of it. And so it brings a new richness and a new depth as I've been preparing these. Because what I realize is that, yeah, I know it. Don't always do it. Don't always act like I believe it. But I know it. So I invite you guys to think about that too as I'm talking. I'm sure that many of you who've been around for a while are going to come up with the, well, I know that. But ask yourself, yeah, sure, but am I doing it? And do I really believe it? So today we're going to talk about what it does. What it does. It being God. What it does. And what it does is it creates. God creates. Now, I've always personally had an issue with the idea of God as creator because for me, that brought up that old, quasi-human image of the master puppeteer up there creating this and creating that, and a very much, downward looking deity that is, monkeying around in humans' lives in this fickle sort of way. And somehow the word creator always brought up that image for me, and so personally I had issues with it. But what I realized is that this energy, this principle that is God, what the principle does is it constantly creates. It creates more good. It creates everything. Think about the span of human history. Let's talk about human history. Now, I'm a historian, so I love history, but when I think about the span of human history going from being tribal hunter-gatherers to the incredibly complex society that we have today over a span of about, 10,000 years, that seems like a long time to us, but how did that happen? That happened because ideas were coming to people who were innovating. And every time they innovated, they took humanity a step forward. Where did those ideas come from? God. God constantly creates. Now, I was trying to think about how I describe this to you, and it was like Tuesday morning or something, and I was, it was in the morning, and I'd woken up thinking about this talk, and how could I illustrate this? How could I give an example that people can relate to? Because this is a pretty abstract concept, So I was thinking about it, and in the meantime, my husband was downstairs in the shower getting ready to go to work. It was early in the morning, and I'm upstairs, puttering around in my closet, figuring out what I'm going to wear, and that takes a while for me. And so, I'm thinking, so what I know to be true is that God creates so that the principle can experience what humans experience. An abstract principle can't experience anything. There's nothing, there's no feeling, there's no humanity, there's no tactileness, there's nothing, it's just an abstract principle. But if that principle happens to be all powerful and wants to experience what humans experience, it must take some sort of human form. And if it wants to experience a whole bunch of different things, it must take multiple human forms. So I can say that, but how do I really bring that home? So while I'm thinking about this, Steve comes walking up the stairs and he says, I just had the weirdest thing happen to me. I said, what? He goes, I'm not even sure if this is really an episode of Star Trek, but I just, or if I dreamed it. He said, but I just was remembering this episode of Star Trek. Did you ever see the one called The Child? Now, I like Star Trek, but I'm like, probably, but I don't know that I remember. Well, for those of you who watch Star Trek The Next Generation, you might remember the character of Deanna Troi, the empath. Well, in this episode, she mysteriously gets pregnant, gives birth, has the child grow to be 9 or 10 years old, and then the child realizes that there's an energy that is causing harm to the rest of the Enterprise, and it just leaves its body, dies, if you will, like that, in a span of about 3 weeks. And what they learn is that this is really an energy field that was curious. The Enterprise passed the energy field in space, and the energy field went, oh, I wonder what that's about. Tagged onto the Enterprise, took on human form to understand what it meant to be a human. There was no pain in the pregnancy, no pain in the birth, no pain in the death, but it experienced human life for that time, and then when its curiosity was satisfied, it withdrew, came to Deanna as the entity, and went away. And Steve said, why do you think I thought of that? And I said, it was for me! It was for me! It was for me! Because that is why God constantly creates. It creates constantly to have multiple experiences. That's all. To express and experience good. That is why God continually takes on form. Not just human form, all form. To have the multiplicity of experiences that you can't get from one limited perspective. So God constantly creates. Now, Ernest Holmes says that the mechanism through which God creates is an infinite mind. Now, Holmes uses the word mind. He says in many places that what he means by mind is not brain. It's not thought. It's this complicated alchemy of our emotions and our beliefs and our thoughts and a whole bunch of different things. And that's what Ernest means when he says mind. Over the 80-so years since he wrote The Science Mind, I think we hear thought. And it does work through our thoughts. But somehow we've kind of disconnected the emotional piece from that. We've gotten very rational, that's our culture. But mind, I just want you to know when I say mind, I don't just mean our thinking. It is all of it, is our whole belief. Thought plus emotion equals belief. And that's the mechanism. And so this infinite mind is everywhere. It's all mind. I like to think of this, if you are Harry Potter fans, you might remember that there's this thing in the Harry Potter movies about the room of requirement. And whenever you need something, this room just appears and everything you need is there. Now, it doesn't exist independent of anything else. It's just always there for us. And it's exactly what Harry and his friends need at the time. So they need to go hide in a closet, it's a closet. They need to go to a bookstore, it's a bookstore. They, whatever it is, they need it. That's the way I like to conceive this infinite mind. It is always out there and it is infinite. It has all of the resources anyone would ever need. And they are always out there. So you're all going, okay, great. So where's my new car then? Which door do I have to open to, get that billion dollar lotto ticket, Where is it? So God constantly creates through this infinite mind, channeled through our individual minds. That's the crux. Channeled through our individual minds. Remember, God constantly creates because it wants a multiplicity of experiences. So if God created, I'll just keep using the $1 million example. If God created $1 million for each of us, so Park's got $1 million, Penny's got $1 million, Sadie's got $1 million, Steve's got $1 million, Holly, everybody's got $1 million, That's not a multiplicity of experiences. That's God having a whole bunch of $1 million. And that's it. So how do you experience that? By creating that multiplicity that each one of us as individuals now can express. So back to the story about Steve and me. We accept what's in the infinite mind based on our individual makeup. So we can shift our thoughts and our feelings to accept something more or different. Ernest Holmes has a great quote. He says, this is why the scientist experiences God through the sciences, and the artist experiences God through the arts, and the priest experiences God through the Christ consciousness. But we all experience it through what our own individuality calls us to. So as I'm trying to think of an example, God couldn't give me the idea of Star Trek because I'm not as big a Trekkie as Steve is. So God, working all through infinite mind, gave my husband the idea of Star Trek and had him share it with me so that he and I could have the multiplicity of experience there of him remembering the episode and then me getting to sit down and watch it the next night and remember I hadn't seen it and it was fabulous. I love Star Trek. That's that multiplicity. Why didn't I just get the idea of Star Trek? That's not my individual makeup. So this infinite mind is always operating. It is always giving us ideas. It is always creating. We are on the leading edge of creation, always. So, you know, when we hear the lines and see the bumper stickers and things that say, lead follower, get out of the way, or if there's a trail already there, then you're not on your own path, you're following someone else's, or things like that. This is what it means. God is creating through this infinite mind, channeled through our mind. So how do we know what's God and what's not? When we get an idea and our mind goes, ooh, that's a good idea, I should do that. How do we know that that is infinite mind channeling its infinite capabilities of love and joy and fulfillment through us? It feels good. It feels good. When infinite mind is channeled through our individual mind, we get that yes feeling. So when we have ideas of how to experience our life, and we go, ooh, well, I suppose I could do that. It would make sense. I have a degree in it, so maybe I should go that way. That is not infinite mind expressing individually through you. That is your past continuing to operate unconsciously through you. That is not tapping into the infinite. When we tap into the infinite, it feels new, it feels exciting, it feels powerful, and I hope it scares the pants off of you because that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to have that mighty power of yes. And for a moment, before your conscious mind kicks in and talks you out of it, you believe in it. You get that idea of something you can do, and it is that, yes, I can do this, and you feel on top of the world. I always think of that from Titanic, Leonardo DiCaprio, I'm on top of the world, You have that feeling of, I can do this, I can do this. That is the feeling of infinite mind creating through your mind. Now, the way this works is we all are individuals, so we have our own individual thoughts as well. And that's sometimes where we can get tripped up, because then those individual thoughts kick in, and God is sitting there, calling you to this greater yet to be, and then you go, well, you can't do that, you're too old. You don't have the time. What makes you think that of all the people on this planet, you're the one who can do this? There are people better qualified. This is sounding familiar to anyone in this kind of talk. There are people better qualified, younger, better, blah, blah, blah. Those are the voices that Ernest Holmes is trying to get us to recognize. Don't judge them. Love them. Embrace them. Recognize them for what they are. This is my individual ego mind doing a double check. This is the check and balance. Is this really the infinite mind? Or is this something else? So when you get those ideas from infinite mind channeled through your challenging sensation. And if it's not, double check. Because as God is always creating, it is creating for good. We said that last week. God is always creating for good, so it's constantly creating. It's trying to create more good in our lives. And we are the ones who are getting the idea and allowing it to work through us, channeled through our individual minds. And we do that by accepting that if it feels good, it is good. I remember working out, that no pain, no gain. I used to say, no pain, no pain. I don't believe in no pain, no gain. If you don't have pain, you just don't have pain. It is supposed to be easy. It is supposed to be the power of the infinite operating through each one of us. And the infinite can do anything. Nothing. I remember Reverend Lloyd Barrett when he was at Mile High Church. For those of you who don't know him, he was from Jamaica, and he had the voice of God. And he would say, nothing is too hard for God. And when Lloyd said it, you believed it. So this is all supposed to be easy. So we are always either creating, because God constantly creates, or we are dying. So what are we going to create now that is being called through us to be created by that infinite power that constantly creates? What's being called in your life to be created now? I also heard a phrase this week that says, we want to stay comfortable at the cost of our fulfillment, and the universe will always fulfill us at the cost of our comfort. So, what's being called through you to create? Because God's always creating. And do you believe that the resources are out there? Inherent in every idea is the mechanism for its fulfillment. That's the infinite mind. It's all out there. Can you open your own mind to allow it to be channeled through you? And is it yours to do? And if it's yours to do, know that it will be easy. Because God does constantly create through infinite mind, channeled through our minds. So let's pray. So recognizing that there is one life, one power, one presence, one infinite intelligence that is the creator of all. I recognize right here and now that that power and presence and that life lives and moves through each one of us. It is us. It has taken form through each of us to express and experience itself. And so knowing this, I know that we are all individuations of the one life, of the one power, of the one God. So I accept that that infinite mind is operating for us, through us, at all times. I know for each of us that our heart and our mind is connected to that field of greater possibility. It's connected to that great divine being, that higher-esque self that lives through all of us. And so I accept for each of us as we go into our lives this week, as we go out into the world this week, that we are clear that what God does is create. And that we listen to hear what God is creating through us. And we show up as that beneficial presence. Are we creating more peace? Are we creating more light? Are we creating more good? Are we creating the thing that our soul is calling us to do? Because God is always calling us to create. And so I know for each one of us that we do this, we understand this with a new depth today, that we have a new thought about what God does and why God has taken form as us. I accept for each one of us that we allow this creation to be easy. We allow ourselves to get into the flow of that infinite mind. We allow it to flow through our individual mind. We embrace the makeup of who we are because each one of us brings an consciousness to the mix, and the whole world would be lacking if we were gone. We are that important to the whole. And so I know for each of us that we know this as we move out into our world this week. We have a new inspired sense about ourselves. We create from a deeper place. We think with a new mind. And we go out into the world both inspired and inspiring. And so recognizing that each one of us comes together in this joyous co-creative experience, and that we are always connected to that source of all. I just give grateful thanks. I give thanks to understand that this is what God does, and that it does it through each of us. And so from this place of grateful thanksgiving, I release these words knowing that all is well, that life is truly good, that we can step in to the joy and the peace and the love at any moment just by changing our mind. And so recognizing this and feeling the gratitude fill me, I just let it be. I let go. I release into the infinite mind. And I know that this is done. We are truly blessed. Our week ahead is easy and effortless, and we are change agents in this world. So with gratitude, I let this be. I invite you to anchor it with me by saying, and so it is.